Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to part 2 of our tutorial series for Total War 3 Kingdoms featuring Cao Cao. And in our last part, we talked about the character menu here, and in particularly, we stressed the importance of looking at the stats of our faction leader, as he has the most influence on how a faction is played. Today, we'll be expanding on that by looking at our court, as after all, a faction is not made up of just its leader. And court management is also something that you have to consider on turn 1. So how do you pull up your court? Well, your court is composed of all your characters, and you can look at the court view here on the top left under the court icon. And once we click on that, we open up the faction panel that includes 3 different tabs, and the first one is the court tab, and we see this very generic court right here. Now this follows a very similar structure for almost all factions. If you just have the base game, you'll have this structure for all the Han factions as well as the bandits, with some different names for these positions, but they will have the same purpose with some different effects, of course. But generally speaking, there are 3 tiers of court positions, and they're given by their role positions. So starting from the top, you have characters who can influence your whole faction, like your faction leader here in the middle. You also have your faction heir and a prime minister. As you can see, the prime minister position is currently locked away, and it says that this post is locked until you reach the rank of duke. We'll talk about faction rank a bit later on, as it's not super relevant on turn 1, so we're just gonna keep in mind that this is locked behind a faction rank and not go too much in detail about this at this point. Then we have the second role, and these are your faction councils, and they include positions called the Chancellor, Grand Commandant, Grand Excellency, Grand Director, and Grand Tutor. Each of these positions will grant a set bonus. It doesn't matter what character you place in them, they will always provide the same bonus. For example, the Chancellor position, right now you can see the plus sign means we can add someone to this position. We have already unlocked this with our given faction rank, and if we click on it, you can hover it to any of your character in court, and any of them can join in this position. And you have to make note of a few things. You see a position effect and a few other stats above it. So the first thing you see is the satisfaction change for post. And the reason why you see this is because as characters rank up, and you can see the rank in the middle of the orb here, they will desire greater things from your faction because they feel like they are more valuable members of your faction. So they will demand things called a higher office. And when they have this desire for higher office and they don't have the higher office, they will become dissatisfied with you. Well, every position in the middle tier here will grant a character up to level 8 complete happiness. Meaning before they reach the rank of 8, they will not acquire any desire for higher office, as you can see under the positional effects. And another thing to note is if you give this character such a high position, your faction council, and they defect from your faction. Now how can a character defect? Well, they can defect when their satisfaction reaches 0. So if you cannot manage their satisfaction from other aspect, because they're no longer going to be desiring a higher office until rank 8, and they do happen to defect, then you will trigger a civil war. And civil wars, as it sounds like, will split your empire in half. You will hold on to a small portion of it. The character that triggered the civil war will start a new faction called the Separatist faction, and part of your court, members who get along with that character, will leave your faction. Now this is a very rare occurrence for the player, as you have many ways to deal with satisfaction, but for AI factions you can utilize this to manipulate their court by befriending one of their council positions or perhaps their prime minister or heir to trigger their own civil war. You can even make the enemy faction leader into your spy. It is possible, and you can force the leader himself or herself to trigger a civil war on their faction and creating a split faction. So this is something you can play around later on. We'll cover this when we're talking about espionage, but that is something you have to make note of. So hopefully you don't put in a character who hates you too much and have a faction grudge that you can't curb even when you get rid of their desire for higher office by giving them a key post in your faction. And aside from that bonus, you can see that the bonus under position effects, the key one here, is 15% income from peasantry. And it doesn't matter who we hover, that will be the same bonus, and that will always be the bonus of the Chancellor position, which is unlike the positions up here. The Prime Minister, Faction Leader, and Heir will grant bonuses on their traits and background title, which we covered in our last part, and those that have the conditional statement of if Prime Minister, Heir, or Leader, then those will become active. So who you place in these positions matter tremendously. So it's very important to put good characters with great traits in these key posts. And not only are they going to give you faction-wide bonus based on their traits, based on their skills, based on their background, they will also remain satisfied with you with no desire for higher office forever. The game states they will have no desire up to rank 10, but since rank 10 is the max rank, basically they will never desire for higher office because at this point there are no more higher offices. Prime Minister, Heir, and Faction Leader are the highest office in your faction. Then below these council positions, you have your administrators. Now currently we also don't have any administrators. There are many ways to gain administrators. They're not locked behind faction rank, although faction rank will provide you additional administrators, whereas this requires Duke. These two positions require Marquis. These positions require second Marquis. So basically as you rank up, right now you're given the rank of Noble at the start of the game. If you rank up to second Marquis, which is the first rank up, you'll get 2 more council positions. And by the time you rank up again to Marquis, you get 2 more. And then when you become a Duke, you get the position of Prime Minister. The Prime Minister will happen quite late, whereas Faction Leader is always there, and Faction Heir is also always there. And we'll come back and talk about the Heir, as it's a very important position in the early game, and probably the only thing you really need to manage on turn 1. The Chancellor position, on the other hand, is a terrible position to take on turn 1, simply because no matter who you put in this position, the bonus is just 15% income from peasantry, but the cost is a salary increase. You can see that Xia Houdun's new salary, should we put him in this position, becomes 350, and that's an increase of 200 from his current salary of 150. As of patch 1.6.1, which is what I'm recording this on, or at least the beta version of 1.6.1, the base salary of characters is currently 150. It defaults to 150, but our family members, which we covered in our last part, are always without a salary. They don't require you to pay them to work for you because they are members of your family. But they don't just get an increase of 200. It always increases the salary of your character to 350. So Chancellors, Grand Commandants, Grand Excellency, Grand Director, Grand Tutor, these positions will push your salary to 350. So it's actually really bad to give them to a family character. You actually want to give these to non-family members, so to minimize the increase of salary. That's something to keep in mind. And as you might have noticed, some of these characters, let's say Cao Song here, has 0 increase to satisfaction, whereas Xia Houyuan has 6 and Xia Houdun has 12. Well, that's a simple reflection on their rank. At rank 1, they know they're worthless to your faction, so they have no desire for higher office. Therefore, if you give them a higher office position, it won't change their current satisfaction. At rank 2, that increases by 6. So it means right now on Xia Houyuan, if we look at him, and we can, let's just pop out and take a look at him. Under satisfaction, you can see on the negative factors, he has currently -6 from desire for higher court position. And conversely, Xiahou Dun, who's rank 3, thinks even higher of himself, and he has minus 12. So multiples of 6 here. So that will go away if we give him a higher office position. So if we give Xiahou Dun the position, we'll save 12 points of satisfaction. If we give Xiahou Yuan the position, we'll save 6. Now this is not a strong consideration for you, because your characters will continuously level up. So all you really need to know is that it will take care of this negative factor until they're rank 8. Once they hit rank 9, however, they'll go back to minus 6 because it's one level higher than what their 0 point is. So that's what you have to think about. Now, a much more influential position on your faction is actually the administrator positions, even though they are a lower tier compared to your faction council members. And they will provide satisfaction up to rank 4. And you can't just assign anyone to these positions. There is actually a science behind it. There are certain characters who are great administrators. Now, before we talk about that, since we don't have one unlocked right now, that will be a topic for a later part where we will really focus in on what makes a great administrator. Right now, all I want to talk about is what are administrators and what are their purposes in a faction. Well, administrators will take care of a commandery for you, and we did talk about this before. Right now, if we look on the game map, which we haven't really done, we see that we start out with this settlement called Chen, and beneath it is the settlement name. So Chen is the commandery name. You can see other Chens on the map. So this is basically a province in any other Total War game, and this is the city name. So right now our city is Suiyang, and the commandery name is Chen. And we also have 2 other components of this commandery. If we click on our current settlement, we can see those 2 other pieces. These 3 pieces together will form our commandery. We just currently do not own the other 2 pieces. And these 2 pieces are minor settlements compared to this. I like to call this the capital of the commandery, and these are the counties, or the resource counties in particular, because each of them produce a set resource as symbolized by the icon underneath. So you see one of them is a livestock farm, the other one is a farmland. You can see these same symbols out on the campaign map in the square on the right of the tab that shows information about the settlement. So these names are rather new. They were added in 1.6, and aside from giving a name to a location, they're used for a historical landmark, as before this point what was written here was just the word farmland. So it kind of told you farmland in 2 places. Now we have actual names of the county themselves. That's kind of what a commandery is. So if we have control of the entire Chen commandery, that's all of Chen here, then we would own 3 pieces. We'll own the capital, we'll own a livestock farm, and we'll also own a farmland. And if we want someone to make this commandery better, we can assign an administrator to it. And there's actually an icon here that we currently cannot use because we don't have any administrator position unlocked that will help us assign administrators. Now, you don't need to own the whole commandery to assign an administrator. All you need to do is own the capital. So in this case, we own the capital county, and therefore we can assign administrators if we had the position unlocked. And why would we want to put administrator here? Well, administrators provide a wide variety of buff, from increasing your income, decreasing construction time, decreasing construction cost, providing an extra garrison to defend your commandery, and other various bonuses depending on their traits and background. So those are very, very strong. You can almost think of them as miniature or mini faction leaders that are responsible for one particular commandery on the map, and they will really help push your income of those commanderies much higher and also save money to build those up. So it's a very, very important role, and you can get multiple administrators in a game. You get them passively as you rank up your faction rank. You also get them from reforms, which is also another topic. We can talk about administrators all day, but I think at this point we provided enough information about them for you to know what they are for. And much like the Prime Minister, Heir, and Faction Leader positions, administrators need to be picked carefully because each one provide their unique set of bonuses. As we hover over Cao Cao, right now currently there's a few bugs where the administrator bonuses are also listed, but we can use those to kind of take a look. The conditional statement for administrators are administered commandery. In this case, the first 3 bonus we see here under Cao Cao are actually not active because he's currently our faction leader, but those would be active if Cao Cao becomes administrator, which is impossible for us because he's our leader. But let's say he gets confederated by another faction when you're playing as another faction, then you can assign him to whatever role you want because at this point he's no longer your leader. And in this case, if Cao Cao is administrator, you see that construction costs go down by 5%, building upkeep goes down by 25%, and you also generate 5% extra income from all sources. So you can see what I'm talking about when you have to be careful who you pick in these positions because you could get wonderful bonuses from them. And speaking of wonderful bonuses from unique positions, the one position we can really mess with on turn 1 is the faction Heir, because it's always unlocked. This is the character that will take over the position of faction leader should your leader die. So it's obviously very, very important. And you can see here the faction Heir gets a couple passive bonuses, and that is there is no desire for higher office until character reaches rank 10, which is max. There is a character defection can trigger civil war, which is quite obvious. If your council can do it, your heir can definitely do it. And then you get 25% chance of evading capture post-battle. This lowers your capture chance, as in the enemy have a harder time to capture you should you lose a battle. And that prevents situation where the enemy can capture you and execute you. So that's obviously a situation you don't want to be in. So giving a bonus to escape definitely helps. Right now we have a problem as we begin this game because our faction Heir is a little baby. It is our son, but the problem here is because he's a kid, and if we want to talk about kids, we might as well go into the family tree tab. We can see that Cao Cao here is married to Lady Bian and has 2 children. Both of these child are not on our character list. We can see Cao Ang and Cao Pi, and they're not in our character list. That's because the game treats children or kids who has not come of age yet as basically non-playable characters. They're stashed in your faction, but you can't utilize them until they come of age. And in the base game 190 start, the default age to come of age is 18. So we see that Cao Ang is 13 right now, Cao Pi is 3. So both of these characters are basically unusable until they reach the age of 18, which at that time they will change look to become adult and they will join your faction as part of your court. And at that point, their stats, their traits, and their backgrounds become active and usable. So what I mean right now is that actually Cao Pi is providing 0 bonuses to your faction because he's still a baby, even though he might have useful traits or backgrounds on him already. It's just not applied. So what you really want to do in the early game, if you have a situation like Cao Cao where his 3-year-old child is his heir, you gotta wait 15 years before his bonus become active. 15 years in game is 75 turns. That is way too long to not get any bonus from one of your most important positions. So what you need to do is change heir. And it's actually quite easy to change heir in the game. You have to go to the family tree. As you can see, whoever we hover, you have this button that says make heir. You can only make family members heir. So they have to have the symbol, this character's member of your family, or the ruling family symbol, for them to become your heir. You can pick your father if you want. You can pick your spouse if you want. You can pick your cousin if you want. You can pick your other son if you want. But in this case, we should talk about what makes a good heir. And obviously you might be thinking about passing on to a child and all that, but that's not really what I mean. I mean, who has the best bonuses for the heir position in your faction? It's going to be case by case. You have to really spend some time to look at your characters. We looked at the leader in depth last time. We looked at his background and saw what bonus he brings to the whole faction. We looked at his traits or stats, and we also looked at his traits, but in terms of his stats, authority stat we mentioned is the key stat to drive satisfaction faction-wide, and it's actually the only stat that influences this faction-wide bonus. None of the other stat have a condition that says if leader, heir, or prime minister. So clearly, the only stat that's going to be relevant when looking for heir is the authority stat, especially if you need satisfaction. And on higher difficulties, satisfaction is a very important thing to manage because all characters starts out with -10 general discontent. That is a difficulty modifier. If you play on a lower difficulty, that number will be smaller, but it maxes out at 10 on legendary. And I think if you go to easy difficulty, it might actually be a positive bonus to help you out, but I'm not sure because I have never played on such a difficulty. And because we know authority is so important, then naturally the characters that is good as heir are commanders, because commanders are yellow and commanders are primary stat being authority, so they will naturally have high authority. And not only that, commanders have wonderful skill trees for the leader, heir, and faction prime minister positions. And those skills in particular are flexibility, which gives you another 25% redeployment cost, which we kind of talked about last time when we covered it under strategic mastermind. We'll talk about it once we get to it, once it becomes relevant in game, but it's a bonus, so that's one bonus. Then we also get +5 faction support from dignity, and then we also get +1 available assignments from nobility, and then finally we get +1 starting rank for all recruits, and that's from understanding. These 4 skills in these positions exist on pretty much every commander in the game, especially generic commanders. But in our case, Cao Cao's unique skill is right here on active skill, so the rest of his tree look quite like generic commander trees. And if we flip to Lady Bian, who also has, I believe, she doesn't actually have any unique skills. She has the default commander skill, even though she received her own unique art. And for those of you who are wondering about unique art, if you're really confused and don't know if this character is unique, look at his armor. Unique art characters get their art from their armor, and they will have this little Kirin symbol on the armor that shows that this armor is bounded to character and cannot be swapped. So if you see that they have a gold armor, especially with the Kirin symbol, and the armor is named Lady Bian's armor, or Cao Cao's armor, or Xia Houdun's armor, then this art is unique and this character is unique. And in our case, Lady Bian, despite having the unique armor, actually doesn't have a unique skill tree, but we can locate the same exact 4 skills down here. Cao Song, our father, who does not have the armor, therefore he is a generic general, also have these same 4 skills, which make commanders just really great. Because if we take a counter example, let's take a look at a Vanguard character. So this is a red character. They don't have any good faction-wide skills. Just scanning over them, you don't see that conditional statement. It doesn't exist here, doesn't exist here, not here, not here, not here, not here, not here. And basically, you have to come to here for reach. You get 1 extra army. And for flexibility, which is also available in the commander, 25% redeployment cost. And I believe that's it. Oh, also 5 faction support. So the one you're missing here is +1 assignment and also +1 faction starting unit rank. But you do get 1 extra army. So instead of 4, you get 3. And in all honesty, not getting that 1 extra assignment is actually really bad. The assignment is actually really strong. +1 starting rank is very strong. I'm not saying +1 available army is bad, but it's just not as good. So you also have lower authority stat because that's not your primary stat. And if we look at a champion, a green character, you also see that if we hover really quickly, you get 1 army, you get 25% redeployment. We're not even going to look at the active skills, but they're never there. And that's it. So 2 bonuses on champion. Also low authority. So that pretty much solves it, and we want a character who is commander. And in our case, Lady Bian, our wife, is actually perfect for this role. Not only is she a commander with high authority, she also has the available skills coming up as we can unlock them as she rank up. And if we take a look at her background, you can see that she gets +5 satisfaction faction wide if the character is prime minister, heir, or faction leader. So that's another 5 points to boost to the satisfaction. And if you're really confused and don't want to hover over a lot of stuff, one thing we forgot to cover in yesterday's part is that in part 1 we talked about everything inside the character panel except for these buttons here. You can show where this character is on the world by clicking this. In our case, she's on court, we see her relationship. But if the character is on the map, I believe, oh no, this automatically goes into the character panel, which is also part of the court panel. It's the last one. It shows all the relationship, all the stats, all the age, and it basically shows you everyone you have met so far in the game, including characters from other factions. So you can search by faction, search by rank, search by name, search by age, search by certain stat, who has the highest stat. You can take a look here. And these are all characters you have met, and also who they get along with, who they don't like, and so forth. That's one button we forgot to cover. The other button, which is actually super useful, is this button right here. Show in high detailed effect panel. Once we click that, this panel will show up on the left, and it will show all our bonuses by type. Means what we will get if we are the commander of army, what our army will get regardless whether we're a commander or not, personal effects to our own character like stat boost and other bonuses, and we also, there's tons of these, and then what we get if we are prime minister, heir, or faction leader, right? This is a great summary for you to look at to see if you want to have this character in this role. What your retinue bonus get, what your character gets, this army, this is the weird one because they should really type this as own army and put this with the army bonus. But anyhow, what happens when we're administrator? So all the bonuses are listed very neatly in this panel, and it's very useful. So for example, for Lady Bian, we can take a look because we're thinking about making her our heir. Right now, she will give us 7 points of satisfaction and then another 5 points from her background, the 7s from her authority, and that's it. But we know that she has 4 more skills coming up, so we'll get those bonuses too. If we look at our dad, you can see that our dad can provide 5 satisfaction, 10% income to commerce, and -3 public order, which is a penalty. And these come from his traits. We can see cordial gives 10% commerce, but this is to, oh no, this one's from his background because he's the ambitious tycoon and he gives 10% extra to commerce income. And commerce income is one type of income. We'll talk about this later. This might sound good right now, but actually Cao Cao's faction currently only holds land that has farm. So this is peasantry income, as you can see here on the left. This will dive a little bit deeper in another part. And he also has a penalty and only 5 satisfaction. In this case, our wife wins, and we're gonna make her our heir. And the only way you can change heir is actually through the family tree page and not on the court page, which is sometimes a little counterintuitive. You want to go to family tree, only family members can become heir, so I guess that's nice. If you're playing the bandit faction, bandits don't play by the rules. Anyone can be heir because your heir is actually called second in command and you don't actually need to be a family member. So that's the only difference. Aside from that, your heir has to be family member for Han factions. And we're gonna pick Lady Bian right here and make her heir. It's a free change, but the character who gets removed will lose satisfaction. Fortunately for you, your little baby right now is not gonna get too mad at you. And because Mother is taking over and Lady Bian has huge boost to satisfaction, 12 points as we have seen, we can actually bypass the amount he will lose and he won't leave us as a baby. He has nowhere to go. Don't worry about that. But if you are switching heir later on and you have Lady Bian, who's been heir for a while, and Cao Pi has come of age after 75 turns, and you want to return the position to Cao Pi, then Lady Bian's going to be a little mad and she's going to lose some satisfaction. You just got to keep in mind when you are replacing characters from any of their core positions. Doesn't matter if they're heir, their council position, their administrator. When you take them off, they're going to be angry with you for a short period of time. And in this case, when we assign her to this position, she will gain 10 points of satisfaction in addition to it because she's happy she's getting a promotion, and that will last 2 years. 2 years is 10 turns. What that means is after 10 turns, that will go away. And that's pretty much all we need to know. And we just have to click this right here, and she is going to be our faction heir. Simple as that. And she's right here now. And we're getting her bonuses. Now, another thing to do, which is beyond kind of the scope of this part, is after you make her heir, you might want to think about switching items. But we're saving items for a separate tutorial part because it deserves a part by itself. So we're not going to cover that just yet. But just know you're not done yet. In our very next part, when we talk about diplomacy and items, we'll talk about what we need to do with Lady Bien. Just keep that in mind. So we talked about heir, we talked about all your core positions. There's one extra factor we need to talk about, and that is your council right here. Your council, beyond the bonus they provide you here, can also do something else for you. Once you have a council position, they have something called the Faction Council tab on the top. It's the very last one, and when you click on it, you can have something called Invoke Council. Should you have council members? Right now we could have one, but we don't have it because it's not worth it. The 200 increase to salary is way too much. We'll talk about this when we talk about taxes in terms of treasury. But right now it's basically a very bad position to assign on turn 1. It will drain your economy and it won't bring you enough bonus to justify that drain. But let's say we're foolish and we do indeed assign a chancellor. And once we assign a chancellor, we can ask him to give us a mission, basically. These are in-game missions you can trigger by asking your council to give you an idea of what they want to happen with your faction. Sometimes it's asking you to create a new army. Sometimes it's asking you to upgrade one of your buildings. Sometimes it's asking you to make a friend with another faction or make an enemy. It could be a lot of things, and it really depends on their role. Chancellor tend to be internal development. Grand Excellency is also internal development. Grand Commandant is war. Grand Director tend to be kind of officers, basically asking you to utilize one of your officers, whether to give them assignment, give them a military post, something along those lines. And Grand Tutor tend to be foreign relations. So maybe ask you to send a spy out to a faction, or to befriend a faction, make a trade deal with a faction, or go to war with a faction. So those are all things you can see. And what happens after they give you this mission is, should you complete that mission, your council position will give you a bonus. And that bonus will depend entirely on what class they are from. So we talked about how there are 5 classes represented by the 5 colors. We actually don't have one of each type, which is a bit unfortunate at the beginning for a showcase, but we will. We're missing the blue one, which are strategists. The yellow ones, which we talked about, are commanders. Their bonus are going to be based on satisfaction for commanders. Those are always one of the bonuses. So every time you finish a council faction mission, the satisfaction of that class of generals will all go up. So if you finish it for a commander character, all commanders in your faction will gain satisfaction, and then you can gain other bonuses. I actually don't know the commander one off the top of my head. We have to take a look at that when that becomes relevant. The ones I do know is that for green or champion, they will increase either your population growth or your peasantry income. For blue or the cunning stat strategists, they will gain commerce income, because commerce income is related to the blue stat, whereas peasantry is related to the green stat. And then if you have a sentinel there, they will increase your industry income, which is related to your expertise stat. And finally, if you have a red character there, they tend to decrease your upkeep costs or other military expenditures, maybe increase rank on new recruit, maybe reduce the recruitment costs, but that tend to be their bonus. So that's why you want to perhaps get a balance of all character classes in these 5 roles. Since it doesn't matter who you place there, they will always give the same bonus in-game. So it will always be 15% peasantry, doesn't matter what class of character you give in that position, but the mission they give you on the faction council will give you different bonuses based on their class. And each time is a bit random. You can't really say it will always give you percentage gain to peasantry income from a champion. Sometimes it could be population growth. But regardless, it's always pretty good. So this is definitely something else you can consider when thinking about whether the cost of the position is worth it. But on turn 1, it's really not worth it because you're only getting one set of missions. And when you click Invoke Council, you'll get the missions right away. You have up to forever to complete them. But should they be really hard and you don't want to do them anymore, or should you finish all of them, every 5 turns or every year, you can invoke for new missions. And when you invoke for new missions, if you finish the original one, you'll just get a new one. If you haven't finished the original one, that one will become aborted and you get a new one in its place. So that's something else you can make note of. So that is how the faction councils work. And with that, I think we covered everything about your court and what you need to do on turn 1, namely find yourself an heir. Now, of course, not every faction is going to be as lucky as Cao Cao to have a wonderful wife who is a commander who happens to be a great heir. If you don't have one, then don't panic. You can go without heir, but make that a priority as a position you want to fill up as quickly as possible, because you're missing out on basically another leader bonus, because they give the same level of bonuses to your faction overall. They're the same tier. So if you keep this empty for too long, you're definitely missing out on a ton. And sometimes if you have a character in your court who could be a great heir, then you can always consider adoption, because you definitely need to adopt them into your family before you can make them your heir. Now, adoption do cost money. It costs 4,000 for adoption, 2,000 for marriages, and I believe divorces are also quite pricey at only 1,000. It's cheaper than the other two, but it's not free. You can't just marry and divorce, marry and divorce. It does increase your family members, because even divorced members are still considered part of the ruling family. So you can use your wife as a diplomatic piece in terms of offering her up for marriage if you divorce her, because she will remain part of the ruling family. That's a viable strategy for sure, but it does come with a cost. So that's pretty much it for the faction screen. We talked about the courts, we talked about the family trees, we talked about the characters themselves and how to look up characters in the world map using the character panel. We revisited some of the concept that we missed out on the character panel screen, namely using the world character and the summaries. These summaries are very, very useful and something you should definitely take a look at before you determine what your character will be. This saves you a lot of time from hovering over every piece of item, every piece of bonus, every piece of trait, or every skill that your character has unlocked already. So that's it for this tutorial part. We'll come back next time as we'll talk about turn 1 diplomacy and diplomacy in general, and we'll finally take a look at some of the items as we make those deals. So hopefully this guide is helpful for you, and hope you enjoyed it, and see you guys next time. Bye!